Hi, I'm Shan Wu with a Undercolor of Law hot take about President Biden's proposals for Supreme Court reform. The proposals are actually very straightforward and common sense. They are really only three, and he wisely doesn't get really into like the details of how it would be implemented. But there are three things. He opens with a big one. He wants a constitutional amendment that would actually say that presidents aren't immune, meaning no one's above the law. That's not really Supreme Court reform, but it's a direct response to that presidential immunity decision that the Supreme Court gave. Number two is he wants term limits. He suggests 18 years of a term limit and that a president would appoint a justice every 2 years to spend 18 years in active service. That's an important word. We'll talk about it. And three, he wants a binding code of conduct. So these are good suggestions. The binding code of conduct, let's take that one first. I mean, the Supreme Court finally did come up with a ethics code for themselves. Previously, they'd been the only federal judges in the country, probably the only judges anywhere in the country that had no code of conduct. And the issue is it's a pretty weak one, and there's no mechanism for how it would actually be enforced. Now, the term limit idea, it's really important that it says active service because under the Constitution, the federal judges, as we know, are appointed to life tenures. So if you wanted to change the life tenure aspect of it, it would be difficult and you probably would need an amendment to the Constitution. But the active service part's important because federal judges on the lower courts, meaning all the federal judges except for the Supreme Court, they often take what's called senior status. After a number of years or they age out, they're not stripped of their life tenure because they have life tenure, but they will take senior status and they can basically choose what cases they want to hear and they won't be part of the sort of vacancy count, meaning when they take senior status, there can be an opening for you to appoint, the president to appoint another federal judge. So in that sense, if you used a similar idea with the Supreme Court justices, they would no longer be active past the 18 years. They could still help out on the court. They could perhaps even hear cases. Those would need to be worked out. The key, though, is if they weren't active under this theory, they wouldn't vote. That's where the controversy is going to come, because if you don't let them vote, there's an argument could be made, well, you're somehow depriving them of their life tenure. Let that get fought out if we get to that point, because to me, life tenure means your tenure on the actual court, not the idea that you are no longer voting on cases or not as active as you might be. So there are implementation issues with this, but in concept, this is something that's been talked about a long time. And it's really great that President Biden has come out and just said it, because it indicates just how broken the current system is. For a president to really come out and say, it's broken, we need these changes. Even the Washington Post editorial board hasn't supported the concept. We'll put that up for you. Now, this has triggered the completely expected backlash from Republicans who want to say that this is a political stunt, it has no chance of winning, which I'll talk about in a moment. And what they want to say here is that somehow this is a very dangerous thing to do. So let's look at one of the conservative commentators, Ilya Shapiro, and he had put out a tweet, which we'll put up for you as well. And he says, each time Democrats have broken some norms in this area in the last 2 decades, from blanket filibusters of judicial nominations under Bush to removing the lower court filibuster under Obama, which forced Mitch McConnell to end SCOTUS filibusters under Trump. Didn't really force them to do that. It was unwise and rebounded to their detriment. This will be no different. So, and let's thank this conservative thinker for, being on the lookout to help Democrats avoid any problems. Like that's really his motivation. And it's really a hidden point, right? He wants to say, oh, this is a bad idea. It's not going to work for you politically. It's going to come back to hurt you. Why does he only care about it in this instance? Well, because it would have a detrimental effect to the Supreme Court that they have worked hard to put in. So let's listen to something else that Shapiro said on News Nation, and we'll play that clip for you.
Look, I don't think any of this legislation has a chance of passing, but let me ask Ilya Shapiro.
Yeah. Look, people get upset every June, July with the certain decisions. I wouldn't have thought this one is that big compared to Dobbs overturning Roe v. Wade or the gun case Bruin from a couple of years ago. That tends to rile people up more than a rather broad and ambiguous decision, which, as you said, leaves things to the lower courts. But look, there's a reason why President Biden, along with Bernie Sanders, were the only two Democratic candidates running in the 2020 primary that were against court packing, that is, expanding the court for political reasons. And if your reading of this proposal, Dan, is correct, that the term limits, which in the abstract we can get behind because it would get rid of kind of arbitrary vacancies and morbid health watches over octogenarian justices. But if what it would do would instantly, or within the next 5 years, say every 2 years with a vacancy per the proposal, get rid of the three most senior Republican appointed justices, well, that's the same thing as just adding three justices when you like it. And ask FDR, who was reelected in a landslide in 1936, what court packing is all about. It inured to the Democrats' detriment then, and I think it probably will today. And this is so pie in the sky that even the term limits, which again has a lot going for it, especially that it would seem to increase public confidence in the Supreme Court, would require a constitutional amendment. I think it's too clever by half to argue that by legislation you can change the part of the Constitution that says that federal judges serve during times of good behavior, meaning unless they're impeached.
All right. So getting rid of three senior justices because they have served 18-year terms is not court packing, right? The idea of court packing is you want to pack the court, expand the numbers, and then put in all the people you want on the court. He is referencing FDR, who had tried to do something like that. So here's the issue. For Shapiro to say that this is court packing because the three justices who would be past the 18 years are going to be conservative ones, what that really means is any time that you want to begin this 18-year term limit, it's going to be court packing if the justices he likes are the ones that are going to be affected by it. I would also note, he says it's not a conflict to have rich friends. I mean, that's kind of rich, not to do too much of a pun. It's not a conflict to have rich friends, but it is a conflict to have them pay for you in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, not disclose it, and then also for them to pay for you and have matters before you as a justice. I'm kind of digressing a little bit on that point. Now, there are other things that can be done. The implementation on these reforms will be hard. It's going to get bogged down in exactly how it's done, and ultimately it's going to be challenged in court. And of course, before then, you're going to need the political leverage. You're going to need the majorities to get this done. Again, so important that the president has started this dialogue from the level of the presidency. What else can be done? Well, I've talked about before that other things could be happening right now. The Justice Department, Merrick Garland, could open an investigation into issues like, was there improper financial disclosures being done by both Clarence Thomas as well as Alito? Attorney General Garland could even engage in his favorite pastime, which is appointing special counsels, or he could just do it himself for a change. The important part of this, and I wrote about this a long time ago, I'll put up my now sort of ancient piece on the great MSNBC site Think, which is no longer around. The problem is Supreme Court justices are treated too much like rock stars, like there's something really, really special about them because they're on the court, as though they are the 9 best lawyers in the country, 9 best judges, and they're not. I mean, they got there through political appointments. They typically have good pedigrees, but so do a lot of lawyers. And the problem of making these 9, like the divine 9, they can't ever be changed out, is it obviously gives them enormous power. Whether it is on the right or on the left, it puts too much power in these 9 people's hands. So you can dilute that power by 1, having more of them, and 2, by just rotating them off more regularly. That was an idea I had, which is go back to the days of riding circuit where different federal judges would just rotate through it. But however it gets done, the important part is to begin this dialogue, and that's what President Biden has done. You know, there's this almost cliche quote from the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, which says that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. That's a popular translation. Another translation that I like of that is that the journey of 1,000 miles or 1,000 leagues begins with where your feet are now. And I like that because this is where our feet are right now. They're planted in a situation where this Supreme Court is broken. They're hopelessly conflicted. They have way too much power. So you got to start from where you are. And that's what President Biden has at least begun for us. Okay, that's it for now. Good to talk to you. And please keep those comments coming. Really enjoy reading them, replying to as many as I can. And it gives me good ideas about what things to cover next. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter or X at shanwu.com. Thanks.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.